And hello, and welcome to this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I'm Evan Grant in St. Petersburg at the Trop.
And the trade deadline is only a few days away, Evan, and the Rangers struck first last night made their first move.
Yeah, after the loss to the Rays on Wednesday, the 3-0 loss, the Rangers acquired righty Chase Silseth and catcher Logan O'Hoppe from the Angels for minor leaguer Angel Arredondo.
And Chris Young has shown that in his deadline work over the last several years that he wants to be aggressive. Taking 3 out of 4 from the Mariners over the weekend seemed to get him into that mode here, and here we go.
Yeah, and listen, I think that the need for a right-handed leverage arm became dire after Tuesday's win, and we weren't aware of it. But at the time, Jacob Junis had strained an abductor in his groin area, and he's been placed on the IL as of Thursday morning. So Silseth is going to go straight in to the high leverage role. The Rangers have so far split the first 2 games of the series with the Rays and lead the Astros by a game in the AL West.
And getting ready for a big 3-game series in Houston over the weekend, but the injury front continues now with Junis going on the IL. I believe that's 15, and Josh Young had a setback this week. He's on the IL, but looks like the Rangers may get Corey Seager back this weekend.
Yeah, the plan is for Seager to be activated Friday night in Houston. He came out of his rehab assignment just great. Homered, had a great defensive play, played back-to-back games. Everything seems to be right on course. And listen, our guest this week is a shortstop, and a shortstop only. It was a Ranger who was involved in a big deadline deal in 1998, Royce Clayton, whom the Rangers traded for with Todd Stottlemyre to get him from the Cardinals on the way to winning their second division title. During our conversation with Royce, we had some audio difficulties in the first part of the interview. It's been edited down to eliminate as much of the choppiness as possible. We just wanted to let you know.
And it's kind of the theme of this week's podcast. And on the archives in Arlington, we are going to talk a little bit about trade deadline deals for the Rangers. Some of them went very well. Some of them not so well.
Hey, and if you notice a really quick costume change for both of us, your eyes aren't deceiving you. We recorded most of the podcast on Wednesday before the trade with the Angels, but because we want to bring you the most up-to-date breaking news, we updated our conversation Thursday morning to include some Silseth. It's not a good name for a guy who's already got a lisp to try and pronounce, and O'Hoppe trade.
But you notice I did put on the same shirt that I was wearing yesterday because I am all things about making this podcast as consistently positive as I can. But anyway, I will be honest here. I mean, a week ago, Rangers had lost 2 out of 3 in consecutive series coming out the break. Now they Seattle series. I mean, I've got to admit, Evan, I don't know, and I don't mean to be. I was not very impressed with the Mariners, and you know, people have been talking about the Mariners as being the favorites and the way they're playing. And the Rangers went in, and they could have easily won and swept the 4-game series, but the Rangers have a lot of momentum right now, and they're getting a lot of timely hitting. And just let's take the game on Tuesday night in Tampa. Cal Quantrill comes in and throws his best game of the year, and Austin Wynns, who was starting for the third time, hits a big home run. They're getting production and contributions from so many people on this roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, I asked Skip Schumacher on Tuesday night if it was the best team win of the season because, you know, when you do get 5 shutout innings from Cal Quantrill against the best team in the American League, and you do get a home run from a guy who was 4 for 44 or whatever he was going into the game, and Wynns also had a great at bat for a 9-pitch walk, and obviously Nicky Lopez continues to turn in great productive at bats, even if sometimes they're outs, right? He had a 10-pitch walk, he had a
Pitch
big
walk.
sac fly. Um, they are getting team baseball. Skip, surprisingly enough, in the 15 minutes after the game, couldn't catalog all the team wins, but he did indicate, look, that there's been a number of these lately, and I have to agree that they are playing the style of baseball now for really an extended period of time that I think is Skip Schumacher's style of baseball. This team has taken on his identity in terms of the style that they want to play. Some of that is the fact that they're missing two big guns in Seager and Young. Some of it, I think, is that there are more guys here willing to say, "I trust the next guy will get it done. I trust that things will work out here, and I don't have to go up there and make everything happen by myself." So it's been a good stretch, and I know it's hard to get emotional at the trade deadline and base something on one or two series, but I think if you go back to May, the end of May,
Yeah,
really
two
2
almost
months
two
now,
2 months. Yeah,
they're 29-21. It's the second best record in the American League, I think, behind Boston. And they
they've
have,
got the best offensive numbers from an average OPS and slugging standpoint.
yeah,
So
they have slowly crept up. And as we sit here today, John, right, they have their biggest lead in the American League West to this point. They're at a high water point, which, that's a low bar, right? They're 3 games above 500. They're also, as of this morning, they're a half game back of the White Sox for a bye.
right.
Chicago's got a half game lead for the second best record in the American League. So to compare this to any previous year, like the last two in particular, and how the Rangers operated at the trade deadline, I think it would be disingenuous because the league has changed and the Rangers' circumstances have changed. Their record may not be great, but they are really in control of their own destiny here.
And I don't think, and Jock Peterson obviously has gotten this bad rap here last year, and it has not been a smooth couple of years here. But what he has developed into gives the Rangers a dangerous left-handed threat. And I talked to you about this a little bit over the weekend. Who can hit home runs at Globe Life Field? He can, and the leadoff home runs. And on a team that doesn't have that dominant offensive player like Yordan Alvarez or a guy like that, he becomes a real threat to this lineup.
Yeah, and look, I mean, when you talk about a guy who has learned how to hit home runs, he had a 48-degree launch angle home run that nearly scraped the roof and still landed in the seats on Monday against Seattle. That might be the highest launch angle home run in Globe Life Park history. He he's doing what the Rangers expected him to do when they signed him. He's crushing right-handed pitching. He is bringing some edge and attitude. You see his reactions after he hits these home runs. He's taking really professional at bats. And he is a guy, Jock is 34. He comes from a pedigree of growing up around the Los Angeles Dodgers and going to the playoffs. He knows how precious playoff appearances are, and he is driven. He got his 1,000th hit of his career, I think, on Friday night against Seattle. The Rangers wanted to give him a beer shower after the game. And Jock's response was, "Hey guys, you want to shower me with beer and champagne? Let's get to the playoffs. Then you can shower me with beer." That's where his focus is, and I think that's permeated the team a little bit.
Well, before and we could talk trade deadline. Obviously, we want to get into that. Let's talk a little bit about the injuries. Before that, a little bit, we mentioned Corey Seager at the top. You fully expect that if everything continues to go well physically, he'll be activated for the Astros series this weekend?
Yeah, I think there was some confusion as to whether he might just play one game. And look, one game last night on Tuesday night, a play in the hole with that spinning move and a jump throw and a home run the opposite way. He certainly looked like he was completely capable. I think the Rangers would like to have him recover and play one more game. I say that, and by the time I show up at the ballpark tonight, who knows? He could be there.
Right.
But yeah, I would think the start of the Astros series would be exactly what the Rangers would like. Um, as far as Josh Young goes, I thought I saw when he was walking around the clubhouse yesterday, still a little bit of a hitch in his gait, and so I'm not sure he'll be eligible on. Well, he'll be eligible on Saturday. I'm not sure he'll be ready to play in those last two games before the deadline. But look, I mean, it also does, in some ways, it removes a little bit of a headache because right now, who are you going to take out of the lineup from Nicky Lopez and Ezekiel Duran? These guys are both really
Right,
contributing. In a
right.
perfect world, if you get into August and you get Seager and Young back, and maybe you get to the situation where Zeke or Nicky is getting a little bit fatigued or a little bit exposed, then you have a great platoon situation at second base with Lopez against righties, Duran against lefties, and Duran also having some opportunity to play elsewhere on the field.
And lastly, before we get into the deadline, Jordan Montgomery had a pretty impressive start in his last rehab outing for Round Rock. What's the latest with him?
I think he's still going to make one more start. I think the Rangers would like him to get, um, closer to 90 pitches. And I think, again, on Tuesday, with Cal pitching into the sixth inning and the Rangers not having to use Marco Gonzalez, it gives the Rangers the opportunity on Thursday to drop Marco Gonzalez in the series finale against Tampa Bay, push all the starters back to give Nathan Eovaldi an extra day of rest. And so now you get Eovaldi DeGrom to start the Astros series, which is what the Rangers would like. So there are so many ramifications from what took place off of Cal's start last night in the positive, because it doesn't force you to put Montgomery into the rotation when you might not think he's ready yet. It gives you the ability to still get that extra rest for those starters. That was a big moment. And I think that after August 1st, you get a better picture of exactly where this team is and how Jordan Montgomery best fits for the roster.
And Evan, let's talk a little bit about the big elephant in the room for every major league team right now. This trade deadline on next Monday. Rangers they've been aggressive in the past. They struck first on Wednesday night. What else do they need? Does this solve the catching problem with catching issue with Ohapi, or are they still be looking for more catching and more relief pitching?
Well, I think, John, obviously with Junis going on the IL, they still need to look for another right-handed relief arm, because who knows how long Jacob is going to be out with this issue. So I think the right-handed relief issue is not solved, and so the Rangers still need to go plow away on that. As for catching, I think the Ohapi deal is more of a long-term type acquisition. Ohapi's got 2 years of control after this year, and as you may be aware, Kyle Higashioka becomes a free agent after this year. Logan Ohapi was a frontline catcher for 2 years with the Angels, and a very productive one at that, with a 736 OPS over 23 and 24. And the Rangers still feel like at the age of 26 that he can recapture that. He's going to go to AAA Round Rock. The people I've talked to here said they've talked to Logan, and he's excited to do that and to work on some catching things and get himself back in a better headspace. And listen, this is a classic example of a guy who I really think change of scenery could make a difference for. The Angels situation has not been fun for a long time. There's been a tremendous amount of upheaval there over the last couple of years, a lot of chaos, and the fact that Ohapi can now take a deep breath and kind of recenter himself, I think really gives the possibility of this guy recapturing what he had.
And it's kind of interesting because the Rangers have a history of acquiring catchers or getting catchers that have played for the Angels. You can go back to Benji Molina, for one, to start his career there. And, of course, Mike Napoli being the real case where the change of scenery certainly did have a huge impact when he came to the Rangers in 2011, and then Jeff Mathis even 4 or 5 years ago. So hopefully, Hoppy, and look what happened when Elias Diaz came here. It was kind of a shot in the arm, and he's really bailed the Rangers out this season. So I guess you never really know.
No, you don't. And all I know is that to get a controllable catcher and a guy who has demonstrated that he can play every day at the big leagues level, who's still just 26, and listen, I don't know much about Angel Arredondo, but he was not in the Rangers top 30. I had not heard much about him. I think he's a fine infielder who showed some power this year. But for the Rangers to get two controllable big league ready needs filled with this deal, I think it has to go down at least in the short term as a win for the Rangers.
But Chris Young isn't done, right?
I think he's going to continue to push. You know, the big question is he going to be able to get some more payroll to add some players who have some salary remaining? You know, in taking on Ohapi, who's in the first year of arbitration, there's probably about an extra $850,000 that the Rangers are taking on in terms of salary. So I don't know how much he convinced Ray Davis to add payroll, but that certainly has to be something of an optimistic sign. And yeah, I think the Rangers are going to continue to push for bullpen help. They have to.
And you had written earlier in the week and about the possibility of Corey Seager being moved. Now Seager has played 2 games on rehab in Frisco. I guess came through it with flying colors and should be back with the team on Friday night in Houston. What's your latest feeling about all of that kind of talk?
Yeah, I mean, I think a week ago when we talked about this, I think my sense was at that point in time was maybe 55% that he'd be traded, 45% that he'd return. But that was also thinking that the Rangers were not going to be in the position that they're still in right now. And I think this team deserves a chance to have its best players on the field. And Corey is the best player that the Rangers have. And if he can get back on the field in Houston and play the last few months of the season, it's as needle moving a trade deadline acquisition as there is in baseball. And so it could be a huge boon for the Rangers offense.
So I guess we'll see here, Evan. You'll be getting very little sleep. I mean, the turnaround from Wednesday night to what you've got is a noon game, those are never fun in St. Petersburg today, and then it's on to Houston. But good luck, my friend, with the next few days.
Thanks. I'll need it. Hopefully I'll sleep till about noon on Friday in Houston.
Our guest this week is longtime Major League shortstop Royce Clayton, who came to the Rangers in a big trade deadline deal in 1998, helped the club win their second American League West Division title that year. He played 17 seasons in the big leagues and finished his career as a world champion with the Boston Red Sox in 2007 and was my go-to guy during the World Series in wearing that old Fox mic, and we'll talk to Royce next. Well, our guest on this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers is Royce Clayton. Played 17 years in the big leagues with 11 teams, which I admit I didn't realize until I started looking it up a little bit. Broke in with the Giants in 1991, replaced Ozzie Smith as the shortstop of the Cardinals in 1996, and then came to the Rangers in a big midseason trade in 1998, where Doug Melvin shook up the club and added 3 huge pieces that year. Royce played through the 2007 season, got a World Series ring with the Boston Red Sox that year, and I'll got a little story about that World Series because Royce was kind of my go-to guy there with Fox microphones. Went on to coach in high school in California at Oak Christian School, and we're glad to have you here, Royce. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. It's been a long time. Both 2 of my favorites. I've been around for a long time, and the way that I think our relationship developed and, the time we spent together, I appreciate it. And good to see your faces and good to see you're still doing it.
Yeah, we're still doing it. I don't know. Evan and I are still, we get along at least enough to do this podcast.
That's right.
That's about it.
Let's start with 1998, I guess, because that's obviously where, as we record this, 6 days, less than 6, I guess 5 days away from the trade deadline. In 1998, the Rangers were kind of, Evan, they were kind of muddling along. They were playing okay, but Doug Melvin decided he really needed to shake up the club at the deadline, and we had lost, I believe it was 6 out of 8 going into the trade deadline. We were in Toronto, and Doug actually stayed in Toronto, if you remember. Team comes back to Arlington, and he makes these 2 rather large trades. Kevin Elster was our shortstop. He could not rekindle that magic from 1996. And Doug with the Cardinals acquired Todd Stottlemyre, needed a starting pitcher, and Royce for Darren Oliver and Fernando Tatis Jr. and Mark Little, who most people don't remember. But Royce, what do you remember about that at the deadline? Did you expect? The Cardinals weren't playing great, but did you expect you might be traded at that deadline?
Yeah. I think the writing was on the wall. The St. Louis Cardinals told me that, they wanted me to sign that free agent ending.
Royce, what was it like coming into this team? That trade, and there was also the Todd Zeal acquisition at the same time. And so the left side of the infield got remade. There was a real need. I remember in late July, the Rangers were flirting with like a 5 ERA in the rotation. There was a real need for a starter. And so it is a pretty big overhaul. And while you and Todd had a relationship, or Stottlemyre, I mean, all three of you come into this club. What was it like trying to get everybody like in the same dynamic?
I don't think it took much. I think that Stott and Todd Zeal were experienced pieces. To be honest with you, what I do remember is the presence of Mark McLemore. And, he was kind of me at that time, glue that brought everything together.
Royce, you also had a relationship with Will Clark. I mean, you guys had played together in San Francisco, obviously, for several years. And one thing I remember in September of that year was Will going out there with his broken toe and legging out 2 infield hits in a big game at Baltimore. And we've talked with him about that. We've talked about that with McLemore as well. But, to me, that felt like you guys were 3 games behind the Mariners at that point in time. Really felt like you got a real jolt there. Do you remember anything about that game?
I would be lying if I said I did. I don't. It sounds great. And Will's always had that kind of thing where he can remember pitches and sequences 15 years ago. I just remember, I remember, it was intense as far as like, the ground we made up and how it, last few games. I'm sorry, I wish I had a better story about Will's toe than that, but that's all I got.
It doesn't have to be about Will's toe. That's all good.
And then if the Rangers overtake the Angels, over the last week of the season and everything, and win the division, and then you got to play the Yankees, and the Rangers had a very unpleasant experience with the Yankees in '96. Probably should have won that playoff series, but '98, the Yankees won 125 games, and they were a juggernaut. And what do you remember about that series, other than the Rangers couldn't hit at all in that series against the Yankees?
Everything just seemed to go their way, and it's just very quickly we're down 2-0. I just remember that happening. It's like, man, it just seemed like we just stepped on the field, but to be down 2-0 that quickly was tough, and it was a great team that we're up against.
And then you, of course, remember Game 3, which got rain. We had that long rain delay.
Yeah,
we were down like 4-0, and we had to come back and at 2:00 in the morning and play like 6. Get like 6 out. They had to get 6 outs. That was kind of a rough way to end that season.
Yeah, I remember it well. It's just like, you just hope that we could have, we had a chance if we could have got through that game and found a way to win that game. I think that things kind of stacked up for us to feel that we had a chance for the remainder of the series, but the delay and just not having that opportunity. And once they got ahead, it was tough with the bullpen and Mariota coming in, slamming doors. It's just a tough situation.
And then you signed a long-term deal with the Rangers to stay in Texas. And I think maybe the best team we had was in '99. And that was kind of a disappointing year. We had a really good team that year. And then things kind of changed in the winter of 2000 when the Rangers signed Alex Rodriguez. What do you remember about that? you know, again, you had signed a 4-year deal with Texas. What do you remember about that winter and going in to that offseason?
It changed a lot for me. I was training in Puerto Rico with Pudge, and I got a call from Doug, and it was just like, hey, he give me a heads up that I may hear that they're going after Alex, and he felt at the time they probably didn't have a chance to get him, but he wanted to let me know. And then he asked me if they did somehow, some way get Alex, would I consider moving to second base? And I said no, because I felt, I was always raised to be a shortstop. I love shortstop, everything about the position. And I got stories about why I was so stubborn about playing shortstop. But I just felt at the time, and then looking at what would happen the monstrous contract at the time. And I thought, we just needed a couple pieces in order to be competitive. And I was like, we can't compete if we give this guy that much money. So I asked Doug to trade me, and I thought I was coming home to LA. It was kind of etched in stone that I was coming to LA, and then something happened, and I ended up in Chicago, and I was just like, oh my God. But I wasn't too excited about that end of the situation. But I appreciated Doug giving me, just the respect to trade me to a situation where they needed a shortstop.
Well, you were very perceptive about when we got Alex and the resources. So,
So wait,
as it
Royce,
turned out.
and again, like, to go back to that point, you said you've got stories about why you're so stubborn on shortstop. So why did you feel that way?
Well, as a kid, I ran into this Kimmer. Is it Kimmer or the Brett family? And there was a team in El Segundo, American Legion team. And they were really good at the time. Just imagine like a powerhouse club team today. And they invited me to play, but they had this guy named Willie Parsons that was a shortstop. But I remember calling my dad and telling him, hey, man, I got invited to play for El Segundo. And he goes, great. What position you going to play? And I said, second base, a little third, maybe. He goes, well, okay, we'll enjoy that, but I'm not coming to watch you. And I said, why not? He goes, because you told me you're a shortstop. But never forget that. And I think I told Coach Stevens at the time, I'll wait until the opportunity presents itself. Again, my stubbornness showed when I was invited to play for the West going into the Olympic Festival. They had a guy named Tom Reddington that was the shortstop at the time, projected shortstop. And I told the coach the same thing. I'll sit around till the opportunity presents itself, but I'm gonna play short. And so just in my life, I just think the persistency and the dedication to playing shortstop, I was able to squeak in over 2,000 something games at shortstop or close to 2,000 games, whatever it is. And I only played one game in another position in the big leagues, and that was my last. In 2007, I asked to play third base because I told Francona, I've never played another position, and I was able to play third base one game. That's it.
Mike Lowell had a good season that year. I remember that game you started third for Mike. So
Yeah.
So fast forwarding to 2007, you mentioned Terry Francona and the Red Sox. We signed you late in that season, and you came up in September, and I think you played like 8 regular season games. But we needed some infield depth, some insurance. But then in the postseason, I don't think you were eligible for any of the. Well, you came in too late, I think, but in the World Series, and I think in the LCS too, at that time, if you remember, Fox was adamant about having somebody wear the microphone in the dugout. And you were kind enough to volunteer to do that. And in game 1 of the World Series, if you remember, Fox had Taco Bell and MLB had this promotion: steal a base, win a taco. And they caught you on the mic talking to Jacoby Ellsbury about this. And lo and behold, in game 2, Ellsbury steals the base. And that became this viral sensation kind of in the area in the time just before things went viral. So what do you remember about that whole thing?
I just remember I remember, being mic'd up and, forgetting sometimes, but a lot of what felt I came over to Boston to do was just to kind of be a veteran presence and be like I said, with Lugo, be a safety net if something happened, Michael, whatever. But I really had a good time talking to Dustin Pedroia, Coco, Chris, Ellsbury, these younger players, and kind of tell them like how the game's unfolding, because I'm, sitting there and able to see it as a veteran player. And I remember the moment that Jacoby Ellsbury stole the base and Coco was sat next to me. And I go, well, he goes, yeah, well, everybody gets a free taco. And I remember and thinking like, what do you mean? Because he stole the base, everybody in America gets to get a free taco. I said, well, what if I go to like 10 different Taco Bells and get a free taco? How are they going to know I taco? And I think that's where it took off and everybody was laughing because that's just my conversation with Coco. But yeah, it did create a viral situation. I was never properly compensated by Taco Bell for bringing, that moment that just took off a Taco Bell to what it is today. And I'm still waiting for my check-in opportunity for that.
And you got to retire as a world champion, so that was a very fitting end for your career.
Absolutely.
Royce, it's been great having you. I know that your internet and my internet are not speaking very well to each other, so I apologize for not being as able to pester you with questions as I used to be. But it is great to visit with you, and you had an eventful time as the Rangers shortstop, from that pennant race in '98 and '99, and then obviously when Alex came in 2000 ahead of the 2001 season. Loved watching you play. Loved watching you play shortstop. Your great trivia question: who replaced Ozzie Smith and who was replaced by Alex Rodriguez in two lineups? So, thanks for joining us, man.
Well, in the Archives in Arlington segment for this episode, we're going to continue to look at the trade deadline over the years. And the obvious ones, I think, for the Rangers' sakes, the big ones, obviously, we talked with Royce about 1998. That was a big one. 1989 didn't go so well. When the Rangers acquired Harold Baines for Wilson Alvarez, Sammy Sosa, and Scott Fletcher. That didn't go so well. 2007, obviously, the Mark Teixeira trade, Evan, when they acquired Elvis Andrus, Neftali Feliz, Matt Harrison, Jared Saltalamacchia, put them over the top. The Cliff Lee deal in 2010 was a little earlier, but obviously that was a difference maker. And then looking at Cole Hamels in 2015, even those two trades they made in 2011 for Koji Uehara and Mike Adams were a big factor. And then John Daniels had a couple of not so good trades in 2012 and 2013. He traded Kyle Hendricks for Ryan Dempster in 2012. And then he traded C.J. Edwards and Mike Olt and who else was Grimm? Justin Grimm for Matt Garza. And despite the fact the Rangers, didn't win that season, but they went to the wild card. But in that period of time, what are your kind of overall thoughts on? And then we'll talk a little bit about Chris Young's deals. But what are your thoughts about those trades?
Look, the Teixeira trade has to go down as really a textbook kind of trade in which the Rangers really position themselves for the future, right? In 2010 and 2011, when the Rangers went to the World Series, Elvis Andrus, Matt Harrison, Neftali Feliz all played really significant roles, and you get those kind of contributions on consecutive World Series teams. That's a win every time, regardless of what Teixeira did when he went to the Yankees. Long term, right? Because he was only in Anaheim for a year, in Atlanta for a year, went to Anaheim, and then went to New York. The other trades, look, John was just trying to, John was trying to extend the championship window after 2010 and 2011. And that's when you start to make riskier trades. The Hendricks trade turned out to be a bad trade. Dempster really didn't provide anything in that short period. I don't think anybody could have seen that Kyle Hendricks, where he was drafted, was.
He did great impressions, though, Ryan Dempster. He was really good.
Did have great impressions, and I'm sure he entertained his teammates a lot, but he didn't do anything to move the team. The Garza trade, that was it was a failure. But that season, I think that season was doomed in a lot of ways because you also had to go out and trade for Alex Rios because Nelson Cruz ended up suspended. And the Rangers still made the postseason. And so, you know, if you look at the Rangers' window of contention, which really ran from 2010 through 2016, Elvis was a staple on those teams. And he underperformed some years, and some years he didn't. But you get a guy who did that for a 6-year window in your contention period, you've done well.
But then you move ahead to 15 and 16, the Hamels trade, we don't win the division without that. And the prospects you gave away, none of them really. And you got Jake Diekman in that deal. You also JD got Sam Dyson the same day he got Hamels. So that was
bullpen on the fly. Those two guys really added a lot to the bullpen in both those races. So, you know, I think when JD had the opportunity to be aggressive, he was. I think the only thing I would say that if JD was tentative on anything, I think the Rangers, both in season and off season, held on to Jurickson Profar past his value. And they could have really turned him into a bounty. They didn't do that. And so there was, again, that's the thin line that, like, how do you protect the future and also continue to contend? And that's what he tried to do. I think it's much clearer with Chris Young that his focus is, I'll figure out next year. Give me a chance to capitalize on the opportunity to win this year, and I'm going to take it.
And 23, perfect example of that, where he goes out and gets Max Scherzer, and then Jordan Montgomery and Chris Stratton from the Cardinals. And you gave up some good prospects. But again, none of those guys that yet have Thomas Segisi's playing the majors. TK Roby has had arm injuries. We just saw Luis Angel Acuna, with the White Sox and everything. So, but again, those two trades were dynamic in terms of the Rangers postseason being able to win the World Series.
Look, if you go back to 2023, I think the Rangers have given up 27 prospects for Merrill Kelly, Jordan Montgomery, Aroldis Chapman, Max Scherzer, Mackenzie Gore, Danny Coulomb, Phil Maton, Jake Berger, Andrew Chafin, and Carson Kelly. Now, some of those were off-season trades, but they've given up a lot. That's a full roster of AA or AAA players that they've given away in that time. And so you're seeing now that the minor leagues don't have nearly as much capital left in them, but that was the deal. And look, I think in retrospect, you go back, you look at what Chris did in 24. The Carson Kelly deal was actually a pretty good deal if the Rangers had signed Carson Kelly long term. The 3 trades last year, I think the thinking was the price was too high for bats. Let's go improve a strength. And there's some rational thought behind that, but I think if in retrospect, if you had it to do all over again, I don't think you would, because it just didn't really move the needle for them.
So we'll see what happens. If there's anything over the years here, Rangers have acquired a lot more pitching than they have position players at the deadline. I did forget 2016 when they did acquire 2 pretty prominent position players, catcher Jonathan Lecroy from Milwaukee and the recently inducted Hall of Famer Carlos Beltran from the Yankees. And a couple of the guys they traded, were pretty good relief pitchers. Eric Swanson had a decent career. But I think for the most part, and we'll see how it goes, if you look at the history, and there are obviously glaring exceptions here, the prospects the Rangers have traded, for the most part, have not become, big stars and have come back to haunt them,
Right.
And we'll see if Liam Hicks or one of these guys they traded last year.
Liam Hicks has been, of all those 27 guys that they've dealt, probably Liam Hicks has had the most impact at the major league level. Okay. Hicks was traded I believe it was the Chafin deal. Okay. Maybe it was the Kelly deal. It was
a Kelly deal. Kelly deal, Detroit. Yep.
Okay. So you traded him for Carson Kelly. Detroit left him off their 40-man roster, and he was a Rule 5 draft pick by the Marlins. So, I mean, of all those players, sure, you would love to have Liam Hicks right now. You would love to have Devin Fitzgerald, but the jury is still out on the guys like Fitzgerald and Gavin Feen who were in the Gore trade. But by and large, those guys that they dealt over the last 4 years have not made significant.
And you don't know about these pitchers that Arizona got for Merrill Kelly. I mean, there was some good young pitching there. But again, it's relatively too soon. But we'll see what Chris Young does. I mean, again, history has shown he's very aggressive. And, last year was kind of all last minute, those 3 trades he made for Kelly, Coolum, and Maton. I mean, it was right at the end.
And I do think based on where the Rangers are this year with the pitching situation and the pitchers they'll be potentially acquiring. Look, if you go after one of those Angels relievers, I think the Angels move those relievers after they rectify the Zach Neto situation. And so it might be another situation where you don't make a deal until 10 minutes before the deadline. Which reminds me of the time that Darvish tweeted me a picture of him still wearing a Rangers hat 10 minutes before the deadline in 2017 when I said, we still don't know what the deal with Darvish is. And then he was traded to the Dodgers for Willie Calhoun.
Yes, he was traded with like 2 seconds to spare. That trade went in. So it's always fun, the trade deadline. It puts a few gray hairs on the PR guy and little screaming over the years of what are we doing here? But
are we clear yet? Do we have the all clear? That's the thing, is that fans don't get, like, at 3:00 or whenever the deadline falls. I think this year it's 5:00 Central Time. Everybody wants to say, okay, the deadline's over, no moves. But moves have been submitted. They just haven't been cleared by Major League Baseball yet. So we have to get an official all clear from you. And over the years, there has been some yelling.
I think the Dyson, I'm pretty sure the Dyson deal was done like that. We didn't, that was not announced for 10 or 15 minutes, after the deadline. So
a lot of yelling between John and I.
Yes, there was. But we will do no more yelling today, and we thank you for joining us on this edition of Sports Day Rangers. Next week will be our 50th, Evan, our 50th podcast, which is kind of amazing. And I think we'll have a pretty good big-name special guest who will be joining us next week. But until then, Evan, enjoy Tampa. I did see this little fact that the Rangers are in the process of playing 19 straight games indoors. So You're not getting a lot of sunshine right now, I guess.
No. And Jock Peterson, of all the people, Jock Peterson brought that up to me. He said, are we setting a record for the number of games indoors that we're playing here in a row? And I don't know.
Well, hopefully the roof will be closed in Houston over the weekend. So, again, thanks to our guest, Royce Clayton, this week, and we'll see you all next week.